Alright, I'd like to preface this by saying I definitely was not the only person that had this idea. Obviously, the bigger Monster Hunter channels are going to be doing this at some point too. But I noticed after I did all my testing and everything that there's another channel by the name of Zero Sugar Rush that did intensive testing on the Chameleos Soul as well as the Chameleos Blessing on the armor. So definitely go over there and watch that video and show some support for that creator if you're going to watch this video as well. But I'm just going to be focusing on Chameleos Soul because I really care about the weapon. So let's get into it. If you're anything like me, you're probably getting really tired of seeing Narga weapons, especially the Narga longsword, everywhere. But to be completely honest, the Narga weapons are just amazing. Natural white sharpness, extremely high affinity, decent ramp up skills, and you get that all from a monster that's not that hard to farm. But I have been desperate to look for a new weapon amongst the new weapons that have come out that could replace the Narga weapon either as a contender or as being straight up better. And I think the Chameleos longsword are straight up better. Here's my argument. They have better raw, much better slots. They also have natural affinity. While it may not be as much, it is very easy to get affinity through skills. It has natural defense, which I think that's always great. And on top of that, it has one of the most interesting ramp-up skills that I've seen so far. And although it doesn't have natural white sharpness, if you have Handicraft in your build, which I have Handicraft in my build, you can get way more white sharpness on this weapon than the Narga weapon has naturally. So when I made the Chameleos weapon, which requires the materials that you should be seeing on screen now, I noticed that the ramp-up skills didn't initially seem as good. The attack boost wasn't as large as a Narga weapon's ramp-up attack boost, and defense boost is... It already has 15 naturally. I think the 30 is kind of extraneous. But then I noticed the Chameleos Soul, and that intrigued me. So I went into a quest, and I fought with it, but with all the buffs I was getting from my cats and from my other skills, I couldn't really tell if the Chameleos Soul was making a difference, so I brought it into training mode. And I think the Chameleos Soul is a really, really good ramp-up skill to have. The description for the Chameleos Soul reads, landing a hit will yield a small chance of boosting health, stamina, attack, or defense. And as some people have noticed with some other things in the game, some of these descriptions aren't entirely true or accurate, and I was curious about that, so I brought it into the training mode. And it's not that the description of this is inaccurate, it's just that it gives you the wrong idea. The chance of yielding these boosts isn't small, it's just that it's on a timer. At least that's the way it seems. So the way these boosts or buffs work is the health boost / buff is literally just a heal. It's a nice chunk of health. I'd say it's about as much as a sushi fish. The stamina buff is like using a dash juice. Your stamina regen will be a little bit higher, and your stamina depletion rate is a lot lower. It's really nice, especially if you're using something that is very stamina intensive, like dual blades or bow or something like that. The attack buff is an additional raw 15 attack, which is actually really, really impressive. If you compare that to how much damage you get from the attack boost on the ramp up skill, the attack boost 2, which is only +6, or on the even on the Narga weapons, which is +8, it just blows it out of the water. Of course, it's temporary, but it's still going to have a much more noticeable effect. And then the defense boost is an extra 20 defense on top of whatever you have already, which again is really nice. I really don't want to waste anybody's time, so I'm just going to say the results as the tests are happening in the background. First thing I tested was about how long initially, just off the get-go, it was going to take me to get one of these buffs, because it does say small chance in the description. You'll see here that it literally only takes me 2 hits to get the buff. And it doesn't proc in like 2 hits every single time, but from all the tests that I did, I averaged around like 10 hits usually. I got one test where it happened in 8, one happened in 4, one happened in 1, etc, etc. It's not going to be hard to proc this buff. Once you have this buff, it will last for around a minute, anywhere from like 55 to 60 seconds it seems to be. And in that time, no matter how many times you hit a monster, you will not get another buff. But pretty much as soon as that timer is over, you will get another buff. And you can see that from my very first test where, again, in 2 hits I got a defense buff, and I spent the entire minute hitting the monster, but it wasn't until my defense buff went away that I got a buff for health, which gave me that big heal right there. But if I average out most of the tests I did to see how long it takes the buff to proc, I get about 7.5 hits. At least for my tests. So what you need to know about the buff is, from all my testing, to see how long it takes to proc the buff when you don't have it active, I got an average of about 7.5 or 8 hits. So in 7 to 8 hits, you should see the buff. The buff lasts for about a minute. In that minute, you will not be able to get another Chameleos Soul buff, but I argue that the buffs that you get are large enough that it doesn't really matter. The only issue I see that people would have with the Chameleos Soul buffs is that it's random. You know, you won't guarantee to get your attack or defense up. You won't guarantee to get that heal if your health is low. You know, you shouldn't ever rely on the buff to heal you if you're in danger, or rely on the buff to give you a stamina regen buff instead of just taking a dash juice. So in that regard, like, I'd say half of the buffs are iffy, but the attack and defense buff are nice enough where I think it gives this weapon a whole different level of viability that you can't get from something like the Narga weapons. Hopefully that informs some people on how this works, and maybe more people will start using the Chameleos weapons, because they're really not hard to make, and they just seem so goddamn cool. Anyway, I really should have scripted this video. Oh my god, I was all over the place. Whatever. Yeah, that's that. If you want me to look into any of the other weapon souls or armor set souls or anything like that, I'd be more than willing to. I'm making just about everything right now. Anyway, I'm PhookiNada Blair. Like, subscribe, you know, do all that stuff if you want. And I'll be back probably never. Happy hunting.